She was her favorite customer, her secret muse, her greatest love. To save her future, she had to break her own heart and make her believe it was all just a passing infatuation. Before we begin, subscribe to discover more powerful and emotional lesbian love stories. The bell above the door of the last page, a cozy, independent bookstore tucked into a forgotten corner of the city, chimed softly. For Ilara Vance, the sound was as familiar as her own heartbeat. It was the soundtrack to her life, a life measured in chapters and the scent of old paper and fresh ink. At 32, she had built a fortress of quiet contentment here, surrounded by stories that were safer than her own. She was perched on a rickety wooden ladder, reshelving a stack of Virginia Woolf, when the door chimed again. A gust of autumn wind, crisp and smelling of distant rain, swept in, rustling the staff picks tags hanging from the shelves. Ilara glanced down, and her world, so carefully ordered, tilted on its axis. The woman who entered was all autumn warmth and nervous energy. She had eyes the color of rich honey, wide and intelligent, currently scanning the store with a look of profound awe. A cascade of auburn hair, streaked with gold and copper, fell over the shoulders of her practical, slightly too large tweed blazer. She was young, maybe 22, with the fresh-faced earnestness of a postgraduate student. In her hands, she clutched a well-worn copy of The Price of Salt. "Can I help you find something?" Ilara asked, her voice a little huskier than usual. She descended the ladder, her own uniform of black jeans and a simple cashmere sweater feeling suddenly inadequate. The young woman's gaze snapped to her, and a blush, swift and charming, spread across her cheeks. "Oh, I hope so. I'm looking for anything by Sarah Waters. I've just finished this." She held up the Highsmith novel, her fingers trembling slightly. Ilara felt a familiar professional mask settle into place, a shield she didn't know she needed until this moment. "Right this way. We have a dedicated section for mid-20th century Lesfic and its modern successors." She led the way to a cherished corner of the store, her heart performing a strange, staccato rhythm against her ribs. It was absurd. She was a grown woman, a bookstore owner, not a flustered schoolgirl. Yet, the air around this stranger seemed charged, as if she'd brought the static of the coming storm inside with her. "I'm Ilara," she said, gesturing to the shelf. "Ilara Vance. The owner." "I know," the woman said, then immediately looked horrified. I've read about this place. The article in the city paper. Hidden literary gems. I'm Isolde Chen. But everyone calls me Izzy." She thrust her hand out, then seemed to realize she was still holding her book, and aborted the gesture into an awkward wave. Ilara's lips curved into a genuine smile. "Izzy, it's a pleasure. That article was 2 years ago. I'm impressed you remembered." "I have a good memory for things that matter," Izzy said, her voice dropping almost to a whisper as she turned to examine the shelf, her focus intense. Ilara watched her, this vibrant, brilliant, painfully shy young woman who seemed to glow amidst the somber tones of the old books. She felt a pull, a gravitational force she hadn't experienced in years, maybe ever. It was terrifying. And then Izzy turned back, her honey-colored eyes meeting Ilara's, and asked, "Do you think it's possible? A love like that? So, all-consuming it feels like the only truth in the world." The question hung between them, naked and profound. Ilara's professional mask cracked. "I think," she said carefully, her own heart thudding, "that all the best stories hold a kernel of truth. And that every truth was once someone's story." Izzy held her gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable, a silent, electric understanding passing between them. "I'd like to believe that," she murmured. She bought fingersmith and tipping the velvet, and Ilara's hand shook as she handed over the paper bag. When the door chimed behind Izzy, the store felt emptier, quieter, and infinitely less colorful. The following Thursday, Izzy returned. And the Thursday after that. It became a ritual. She would arrive just after her last seminar, always with a question, always with an insight that left Ilara's mind buzzing. They talked about narrative structure and queer coding, about the Brontes and Jeanette Winterson. They debated the merits of first-person versus third-person omniscient. But beneath the literary analysis, another conversation was unfolding. A A conversation of lingering glances, of hands brushing over a shared book, of blushes that had nothing to do with the shop's heating. Ilara learned that Izzy was in her final year of a literature MA, writing her thesis on the architecture of desire in 20th century lesbian fiction. She learned she was ferociously intelligent, witty when she forgot to be nervous, and possessed of a kindness that showed in the way she helped an elderly customer find a book without Ilara even asking. And Ilara, in turn, found herself sharing pieces of her soul she usually kept under lock and key. She talked about her dream of opening the store, her failed relationship with a photographer who'd wanted a muse, not a partner, her love for the quiet solitude of rainy afternoons spent reading. She was falling. She was falling hard and fast, and it was a beautiful, exhilarating, and utterly catastrophic free fall. Because every time Izzy called her Ms. Vance, the title landed like a stone in her stomach. It was a reminder of the chasm between them. Not just of age. 10 years felt both insignificant and a lifetime, but of context. Ilara was a fixture, a settled part of the city's landscape. Izzy was a student, her life a whirlwind of essays and possibilities, her future a blank, bright page. The most dangerous thought, the one that kept Ilara awake at night, was the dawning, horrifying, thrilling realization. Izzy was falling, too. It was in the way her eyes sought Ilara's the moment she walked in. It was in the way she'd memorized Ilara's favorite tea, Earl Grey, 1 sugar, and brought her a tin of a special blend from a shop she'd found. It was in the way she'd once, while reaching for a book on a high shelf, steadied herself with a hand on Ilara's shoulder, and neither of them had moved for a breathless eternity of a second. The inevitable collision happened on a stormy Thursday in late October. The sky had been threatening rain all day, and it finally broke just as Izzy arrived, dashing into the store looking like a drowned autumn leaf, her hair plastered to her head, her blazer dark with water. "Oh, you're soaked," Ilara exclaimed, coming out from behind the counter with a towel she kept for such emergencies. "Here." "Thank you," Izzy shivered, taking the towel. Her fingers brushed against Ilara's, and a jolt, sharp and undeniable, passed between them. They both froze. The shop was empty. The only sound was the drumming of rain on the windows and the frantic beating of Ilara's heart. "Ilara," Izzy whispered. The use of her first name, without the formality, without the mess, was a seismic shift. "Izzy," Ilara breathed back, her voice barely audible. "I can't stop thinking about you," Izzy said, the words tumbling out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for weeks and the dam had finally burst. "I read these books, and all I see are metaphors for this. For what I feel when I'm with you. It's like every poem I've ever loved suddenly makes sense. You're all I think about." Ilara's world narrowed to the space between them, to the rain-streaked windows, to the beautiful, terrified hope in Izzy's eyes. Every rational argument, every fear about propriety and age and complication, evaporated like mist. "Izzy," she said again, a plea, a surrender. And then Izzy was closing the distance. She moved slowly, giving Ilara every chance to pull away, to stop this. Ilara stood rooted to the spot, mesmerized. Izzy's kiss was nothing like Ilara had imagined. It was not tentative or shy. It was sure. It was a question and an answer all at once. It tasted of rain and mint tea and the terrifying, wonderful precipice of a new beginning. Ilara's hands came up, one tangling in Izzy's wet hair, the other splaying across the small of her back, pulling her closer. The towel fell, forgotten, to the floor. It was a kiss that contained all the words they hadn't dared to speak, all the longing glances, all the quiet afternoons in the bookshop. It was a first sentence and a last line all at once. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. The rain continued its frantic rhythm against the glass. "I've wanted to do that since the first day I saw you," Izzy confessed, her forehead resting against Ilara's. "So have I," Ilara admitted, the truth a liberation. "I was just too afraid to admit it." "Don't be afraid," Izzy murmured, her thumb stroking Ilara's cheek. "Please. Not with me." For 3 weeks, they existed in a secret, golden world. Their Thursday afternoons in the bookshop became stolen hours of whispered conversations and languid kisses amidst the stacks. They graduated to weekends. They spent a Saturday in the art museum, standing before a painting of Sappho and sharing a single set of headphones, listening to a playlist Izzy had made called the Alara Collection. They spent a Sunday in Alara's apartment above the bookshop, surrounded by books and sunlight, talking for hours, learning the map of each other's bodies with a reverence that left Alara feeling both cherished and powerful. It was during one of these perfect Sundays, with Izzy's head in her lap as Alara read aloud from Orlando, that the first crack appeared. "My thesis review is next week," Izzy said, tracing patterns on Alara's knee. "Professor Finch is finally going to look at my draft chapters." Alara's hand stilled on the page. Professor Eleanor Finch was the head of the literature department, a formidable woman in her 60s and notoriously rigorous. She was also, incidentally, a close personal friend of Alara's. They'd sat on several literary panels together. "Finch is tough, but fair," Alara said, hoping her voice sounded neutral. "She'll see the quality of your work, Izzy. I know she will." "I hope so," Izzy sighed, nestling closer. "I just want it to be good. I want to make you proud." The words were a love letter, but they landed with the weight of an anvil. Make you proud. The dynamic, so easy to forget when they were wrapped in each other, was suddenly, starkly clear. Teacher and student. Mentor and protégé. Even if Alara wasn't her official professor, the shadow of that structure loomed over them. A cold knot of anxiety tightened in Alara's stomach. What would happen if anyone found out? What would it do to Izzy's academic career? Her reputation? What would it do to Alara's friendship with Eleanor Finch, a woman who valued academic integrity above all else? She pushed the thoughts away, bending down to kiss Izzy's forehead. "I am already proud of you," she whispered. "So proud." But the seed of doubt had been planted. The storm broke the following Thursday. Izzy burst into the bookshop, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She wasn't holding books. She was clutching a manila folder, her knuckles white. "Izzy, what's wrong?" Alara asked, her heart plummeting. Izzy thrust the folder at her. It was her thesis draft. Scrawled across the title page, in Professor Finch's distinctive, sharp handwriting, was a single word, "See me." And paper-clipped to the front was a note, written on university letterhead. "Isolde. This is highly concerning. While your analysis of the primary texts is, as always, incisive, the theoretical framework you've employed is far too advanced for your current level of study. The architectural metaphor you build your entire argument upon is sophisticated, unique, and, I must say, bears a striking resemblance to a series of lectures given by Alara Vance at the Literary Symposium last year. The connections are too specific to be coincidental. This requires an immediate meeting to discuss academic originality and proper citation practices. My office. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. E. Finch." Alara's blood ran cold. She looked from the note to Izzy's devastated face. "She thinks I plagiarized you," Izzy choked out, tears finally spilling over. "She thinks I stole from you. She all but accused me of it." "Izzy, no, she's being cautious," Alara said, her mind reeling. She had spoken about architectural metaphors in narrative at that symposium. It was a pet theory of hers. And in their long, intimate conversations, she had shared those ideas with Izzy. Freely, passionately. Izzy had absorbed them, synthesized them, and made them her own. It wasn't plagiarism, it was collaboration of the most intimate kind. But how could they ever prove that without revealing everything? "She's not being cautious, she's accusing me," Izzy cried, her voice rising. "My entire degree is on the line. And if I tell her the truth, if I tell her that we're this, she'll see it as a conflict of interest," Alara finished, the coldness seeping into her bones. "She'll see it as me wielding undue influence. She might even see it as you trading favors for ideas." The ugliness of the words hung in the air. The beautiful, secret world they had built shattered into a million pieces, revealing the harsh, judgmental reality outside. "What are we going to do?" Izzy whispered, her voice small and broken. Alara looked at her, at this brilliant, passionate young woman she loved, and saw the terror in her eyes. She saw Izzy's future, her degree, her career, her reputation, teetering on the edge of ruin. And she knew, with a certainty that was like a physical pain, what she had to do. She was the adult. She was the one with the established life. She was the fortress. And fortresses were meant to withstand sieges, even if it meant sacrificing what was inside to protect what was at the gates. "You're going to go to that meeting," Ilara said, her voice surprisingly steady, though she felt like she was breaking apart. "And you're going to tell Professor Finch that you attended my symposium lecture, that you were inspired by it, and that you failed to cite it properly as the spark for your own original work. You will apologize profusely. You will take the slap on the wrist for a citation error. You will salvage your thesis." Izzy stared at her, confusion and dawning horror on her face. But that's a lie. It was more than inspiration, Ilara. It was us. It was everything we talked about. "I know," Ilara said, her heart cracking. "But us is the one thing we cannot tell her. Us is what will destroy your credibility. Us is what she will never understand. So we just hide." Izzy's voice was laced with desperation. "We lie. We pretend this incredible thing never happened." "For now," Ilara said, the words ash in her mouth. "For your sake, Izzy. To protect you." "I don't want protection," Izzy shouted, the sound raw and painful in the quiet shop. "I want you. I love you." It was the first time she'd said it. The words, which should have been a celebration, were a dagger. Ilara took a step back, building a wall brick by painful brick. She forced her face into a mask of cold neutrality, the same mask she'd worn the day they met. "You're young, Izzy. This feels overwhelming now, but it's a passing infatuation, amplified by a shared interest. You'll see that, in time." The lie was so vast, so cruel, that she almost choked on it. She saw the words land on Izzy like physical blows, saw the light in her honey-colored eyes extinguish, replaced by a devastation so complete it was hard to look at. "A passing infatuation," Izzy repeated, her voice flat, dead. "Is that what this was to you?" Ilara couldn't speak. She just gave a tight, barely perceptible nod, her own tears threatening to betray her. Izzy looked at her for a long, terrible moment. She looked at the woman she loved, who was now a stranger behind a fortress wall. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the bookshop. The bell chimed its same, soft chime, as if nothing world-shattering had just occurred. The silence she left behind was deafening. Ilara stood alone in the center of her shop, surrounded by thousands of stories of love and loss, and felt the weight of every single one. She had chosen to become the tragic ending she had always hated in novels. She had broken both their hearts to save Izzy's future. And as the days turned into weeks of a grey, endless November, she wondered if it had been the right choice, or merely the coward's way out. The bookshop felt like a tomb. Every Thursday at 4 o'clock, Ilara's heart would constrict, waiting for a chime that never came. The staff picks card she'd written for Fingersmith, a masterclass in desire and deception, now felt like a personal joke. She was drowning in the silence. She heard nothing from Izzy. The fear that she had destroyed her, that Izzy had failed her thesis or dropped out, was a constant, gnawing ache. Finally, she could bear it no longer. She called Eleanor Finch, her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. "Eleanor. It's Ilara Vance." "Ilara. Hello. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Eleanor's voice was its usual, crisp self. Ilara took a shaky breath. "I'm calling about Isolde Chen. She's a customer of mine, a bright girl. I heard there was some trouble with her thesis." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ah, yes. That was cleared up. A simple matter of improper citation. She cited your symposium talk as inspiration after the fact. She was terribly apologetic. A bit over-emotional, but she's young. The thesis itself is actually quite brilliant. One of the best I've read in years. She's on track to graduate with top marks." Relief, sharp and painful, washed over Ilara. Izzy was safe. She was going to be okay. I'm glad to hear it." Another pause. "Ilara," Eleanor said, her tone shifting, becoming softer, almost knowing. "Isolde is a remarkable young woman. Exceptionally so. It's not uncommon for students of that caliber to develop strong attachments to those who mentor them, to mistake intellectual admiration for something more personal. It's a vulnerability we have to be mindful of. Ilara's blood ran cold. Had Izzy said something? Had Eleanor guessed? Of course, Ilara managed to say, her voice strangled. We have a duty to guide them, not to complicate their paths, Eleanor continued, her meaning crystal clear. She knew. Or she strongly suspected. And she was warning Ilara off, permanently. The conversation ended with hollow pleasantries. Ilara hung up the phone, the finality of it all crashing down around her. Eleanor's words were the official seal on their ending. There was no path back. The winter passed in a blur of grey skies and quiet despair. Ilara functioned. She opened the shop, she served customers, she read books. But the colour had truly leached from her world. She was a ghost in her own life. Izzy's graduation came and went. Ilara saw a picture in the newspaper, the university's graduating class, a sea of black gowns and mortarboards. She pored over the image, searching the tiny, blurred faces, but couldn't find her. It was for the best. A year later, almost to the day, a package arrived at the bookshop. It was a plain cardboard box, addressed to her in a familiar, elegant handwriting that made her heart stop. There was no return address. Hands trembling, she opened it. Inside was a single, hardbound book. It was not a published book, it was a thesis, professionally bound. The title was embossed in gold foil on the cover, The Architecture of Desire, Building a Life in the Margins. By Isolde Chen. Beneath the title was a dedication, 4E. My first and final page. Tears blurred Ilara's vision. She sank into her chair behind the counter and opened it. It was Izzy's thesis, the final, approved version. She flicked through it, seeing their conversations, their ideas, their love story, transformed into sharp,